Hey, Mark. Mark, Dana, I'm just making sure you're able to unmute yourselves.
Yeah, at first I couldn't. Hopefully we got a quorum here tonight, right?
I hope so.
Yeah.
You just need one more and then we can get started.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Perfectly.
Thank you.
Well, welcome to spring in New England, right?
Oh my God, yeah. It's been a bit of a rough day for some of us.
Yeah, do you have a tough time?
Yeah, having the power outage today really set me back a little bit.
Okay,
Yeah, I burned out the battery on my laptop and I was able to, get connected. I use my mobile phone as a hotspot, but once the battery on the laptop went, it was like I could do is just text and call into meetings.
Yeah, I was in Charlestown and I had to come in because my son-in-law Doug and my nephew Matt are both firefighters in the Nahant, and they get kids and they had to go to work, and I'm like, oh God. It was my day. It was my day
Papa's
off.
on call.
Now I have 4 kids the rest of the day. I'm like, oh, with no power, so no movies, no nothing.
Oh my God, that's really old school.
That's why I told him we had a big story about, back in the day when there was no electricity and no cars and no this and no that. And
Yeah, I know.
it was a long day. It was
Yeah,
a long day.
it's been a long day. I know. So Dana, Pat, I see that you've joined. I just want to make sure you're able to unmute yourselves.
I am, but will I be able to mute myself and unmute later?
I'd probably have to unmute you. So hold on. Let me just take care of something. Okay.
You can do it
I
yourself.
think that should be it. You might want to test it and see if you can mute and unmute.
Now I can. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Dana.
Hi. Yeah, and I can't talk, I'm on a Zoom meeting. Yeah, okay.
I'm gonna wait till 6:35 and hopefully others are gonna be joining and then we can get started, but. 2, 3, 4, we do have quorum. We have 4 of us.
Thought we needed 5.
No, we have, oh, wait a minute. 1, 2,
Oh,
3,
they could be, right?
5, 6. There's 7 of us. Wait a minute. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 8 of us and we have 4. So we need one more 5. Patrick, is that what?
I mean, we have a vacancy for a 9-member committee, though.
We have, yes, we have 1 vacancy.
How does that work?
So that was 9 and we needed 5. So now
Right.
we're down to 8. We split the difference, it's 4.
Yeah, but it's still a 9-member committee with a vacancy.
I know, but
Mark, you've been at this a long time. What's your recollection?
let me, I'm gonna go look up, find the open meeting law and see what I can find out while we're waiting.
Good question, Patrick. So it's 4, supposed to have a majority of the community members, right? 4 is not a majority of 8. Good question. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, it just says simple majority.
Certainly simple.
So does one of us count as more than one? Like one. Yeah, I think unfortunately that would mean 5.
5,
Yeah, I would agree.
okay. Let's sit tight.
There.
Lynn's here, awesome.
Oh, the winds up there in Breezy Hill, Patrick.
Very breezy today.
I bet, huh? You up in the tower at all?
I am up in the tower right now.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, how cool is that?
It is
I-
very cool. When am
Yeah,
I getting the invitation, Pat? I want to get up there.
We have to have a happy hour up there.
Kim's in her pajamas. Otherwise, I'd say come on over right now.
Is
So
it
Lynn,
cold?
Lynn, you want to get on top of the tower, not to the top wind, on top.
Thank you, Dave. That'd be good. That's my style.
Do you have heat up there? Obviously electricity. So.
I have a space heater and it is really cold, but it was no warmer in the house with the power on, power off for all day. So it was pretty cold. It's a three season tower.
3 seasons, not 4 seasons, so when the temperature drops, what, below 35?
Yeah, November to say March. It's
Okay,
not that great.
You need to put a roof deck on that.
Well, it's the railing, yeah. They're just the railing.
wraparound deck and sell tickets.
Lots of good ideas for you, Patrick.
Yeah,
There are many ideas.
all right, I have 6:34, so why don't we get started? Hello, everyone, my name is Michelle Capano. I am Chair of the Housing Protection Plan Advisory Subcommittee. Today is Thursday, April 4th, and we are calling the meeting at 6:35 p.m. Present from the committee is myself, Mark Cullinan, Lynn Spencer, Patrick O'Reilly, and Dana Sheehan. We have members of the public, which we're glad to have. So I'm gonna jump right in. Tonight's meeting, we're gonna go through some approvals of the meeting minutes. there'll be an update on the housing committee, which I will present. And then we are going to go through the red line changes on the housing plan. And then we'll discuss housing updates that we've received. Any old business since the last time we met in November. And then we'll open it up to citizens forum. So the first thing I sent out is the meeting minutes from November 2nd and November 16th. Is there a motion? Oh, first of all, have people reviewed the minutes, and are there any questions, changes, edits?
Okay, they're well done. What were the dates of the minutes?
Sure. November 2nd and November 16th, 2023.
16, 20, okay, I move to accept the motion of November 2nd and November 16th of 2023.
And there's a second to Mark's motion.
I second.
Thank you, Lynn. Minutes. And great. So I'm going to just go through a roll call vote. Dana,
Yes.
thank you. Patrick,
Yes.
Lynn,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes,
and the chair is aye. Just to remind members of the public, to please make sure that your phone is on mute. And we'll have time at the end of our meeting for public comments. Okay, thank you. So the next thing I want to do is just an update on the housing committee. So as folks recall, we prepared a housing production plan, which we provided to the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board back in November. And then during that time, we had gone through a round of feedback from folks. And we started receiving quite a bit of citizens' feedback. And so that brought us to a bit of a pivot in our process and in our schedule and timeline to allow us to start looking more closely at the citizens' feedback and schedule some additional time with some of the stakeholders to talk through the housing plan. During that time, from late November into December, we started cataloging and organizing all of the citizen feedback that we're receiving. There's some very good questions that were asked. Some of them required some additional research, some assistance from our advisors, MAPC. And then unfortunately, we had the loss of Michael Raworth. So we, out of respect for our community, we decided to take a pause. And then after the first of the year, Tony and I got together. We started going through the plan. We started looking at the citizens' feedback, trying to organize it in a way that we could make the appropriate adjustments, do some more research. However, we ran out of time with MAPC according to our contract. And so we also had to work on a contract extension with MAPC. That took a little bit of time in terms of scoping out what we needed for them to get us through this period of kind of sitting on that, 1 yard line and getting us to the goal. And so through that, but additionally, myself spending a lot of time with this document and really trying to put together the different pieces of citizens' feedback that we received, and also bring it to the level that we needed. Afterwards, we met with MAPC. We spent some time walking through all of the changes, recommended changes and edits in the plan. We talked to them about how, these changes to be reflective, but also will these changes allow us acceptance and approval with the state? Because that's the most important piece. Afterwards, once our contract activities were finalized, we agreed on what the schedule was going to be. And then I started organizing all of the materials. And I know I sent folks a lot of materials, and I apologize for that. This was quite an extensive process to go through to make sure our records are appropriate and we can all take a look at the questions, the comments, the feedback, all the changes, things that people were asking, and understanding the importance of all this. So that brings us up to today's meeting. And so I'm going to stop there, see if there's any questions from the committee.
So I have a question, Michelle.
Sure, Dean.
So you mentioned, working with MAPC and we're working on that contract. So are they fully paid? I mean, or is this it? Is this the extent of?
Uh, So
the
I can't
plan?
tell you regarding payment. That's not something that's in my role as the chair. I'd work through the town administrator if he felt, their hours were not in line with what was expected according to the contract. But no, we're not done with MAPC. We have another grant that we received that we will start the second part of this effort, next part, our next project, which is under MBTA 3A, which there's an analysis that they've been working on that they're going to present to us probably in May or June, that will help us kind of set the stage of how we want to look at that statute and apply it to the town.
So are we, as a committee, satisfied with the help that we've got from MAPC, or is it time to consider other consultants at this point?
We're under contract with them for this next piece of work. I'm satisfied, but if there are members of the committee who feel dissatisfied and we want to discuss that, I'm open to that. Or we can, schedule schedule a meeting next week and have a dedicated conversation about their performance. In terms of, I can just share my experience, having been a management consultant. When I've worked on, programs with clients, obviously as part of customer and client retention, we do interview, the senior executives to talk through the performance of the work that was done by the team, things that went well, things that we need to improve on. We also do anonymous surveys out to the executive team. I don't know whether that is part of MAPC's process. I defer to, I can always, defer to Tony, and, if he has questions or, feels that something we did really well with them, we want to highlight, or we want to share feedback for the next time or going into this next project. It's a good opportunity to do that.
Thanks, Michelle. Could I just follow that up for just a moment? Mark,
Sure.
can I just follow up and I'll just take a minute, but it seems like that the level of edits and the plan itself might have been a little out of sync with the community input. I can talk to that. I'm not here to indict MAPC. I'm thinking that maybe, they could have taken a little bit more time to get to know us as a town and as a community. The Nahant Housing Authority didn't have much interaction with MAPC. They basically, the first cut of the plan, they just asked us what the income limits would be for people to be residents of the Housing Authority, and then that was it. And the rest of it was just whatever they put in, but it didn't include feedback directly from the Housing Authority till basically late in the process. So, like I said, I've only been on this committee since October. You guys have been through this whole process. I'd like to open it up to see what other people think here, or community input, to see what they think.
Well, we can take community input at the end of the meeting, Dana. I'd like the committee members to respond, but recognizing that you've only came in October and are a replacement for a prior Housing Authority committee member who did start with us. And then we went through a period where that individual didn't attend any meetings. And there was, we had engagement with MAPC during those meetings. And so questions did come up. I reached out to the executive director to get, some questions answered, never heard back from the executive director of the Housing Authority. And there was a bit of back and forth on trying to get information out of the Nahant Housing Authority. Now, the individual who's the first representative, had that person been present for the meetings and received the feedback and the questions, some of the edits that you're talking about probably would have not occurred. But unfortunately, the individual, and I've been keeping attendance records of these meetings, and I'm happy to share with you, didn't have a very good attendance record. And that makes a difference when you're participating on these types of efforts from a municipality standpoint. This is a big effort, and everyone, and when we first talked about this and we kicked off this program over a year ago, we stressed the importance of participation by our committee members. And if at any point someone couldn't commit fully, I'm happy to sit with them and talk to them. Now, for the individual that we're highlighting, I reached out to the person several times, right? Had no response from this person. Didn't know if there was a medical issue, personal issue, had nothing. And so if there were accommodations that needed to be made, more than happy to do that, right? Where we could rearrange time, I would have scheduled my own personal time to go over what was covered at the meeting. None of that occurred. So it's unfortunately the responsibility of that individual to report back to the housing authority. And if the housing authority wasn't getting the information that they needed on the work of this committee, I don't know what much more I could have done. If the executive director felt they needed more information out of us, the executive director could have contacted me or Tony as well.
Well, I hear what you're saying, Michelle, and I'd just like to talk about it from here going forward. And we can't blame it all on that one individual, who was disengaged.
However,
Some of
Dana, the
the
most
blame
important
goes
parts
to
of
the
the
consultants as
program.
well. They were, they're the ones who are getting paid to create a good report for the community. So there's some blame that goes there too. So let's just talk about going forward.
I appreciate that. And I think it's a learning curve for anybody when we're managing these big programs to make sure the citizens that are involved, whether they're an elected office, representing a committee, that they're able to put forth the necessary time. However, the work that we were doing at the beginning of this program was the most important work that had to get done, and the engagement was needed, and it didn't happen. I'm sorry for that. I feel I've done the best as I could as the chair to get that person engaged, but it didn't happen. You stepped in, and we went for a period of time trying to make a determination whether to replace contact the housing authority. And I'm happy to have you, and you've been engaged and you've provided great feedback for us, but I can't recreate what happened in the past. All I can do is move forward, and hopefully we can finalize our work product and complete it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. Let's try to finalize this plan and move forward.
Michelle, if I could talk about community engagement a little outside the participation of the non-housing authority, which is a very important. I think you summarized that very well. But community engagement, I think MAPC and the town in this community did a great job in engaging with the community in this effort. As you know, we had 2 public hearings. They were well advertised. We encouraged people to come. We had great response, I think, at town hall for both of those engagements. Get a lot of information from the public. All of our meetings are open in public. You did a great job in making sure that citizens' forums was robust and engaged. So in regards to community participation, I think we've done an outstanding job.
Thank you.
I can't hear you, man.
I said wholehearted agreement.
Thanks.
So let's move on and get through this
All right.
report.
All right, so the next thing is to go through our red line changes. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to pull up the red line document, and I have another document I need to follow on. So it'll just get me set up here. Okay. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay. Now can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. This is the red line copy. So I'm just going to scroll through and talk about the changes that were made, and we can certainly, if there are questions, definitely address those. Let me just keep scrolling down. So, one of the things wanted to note, and it's on page 1, and I just to let folks know, is that we did revise the source of funding for the project, so it was clear. And then I'm going to just jump to the table of contents. So this executive summary, a majority of the information came from Michael Barworth. He had spent some time after we had published the plan to take a look at it and review it. And him and I connected and talked about, what are the things that we felt like, based on the feedback that we heard, that we needed to revise in the plan. And so, he's memorialized in this plan. So what we've tried to do is, organize the executive summary in clearer sections for the reader. So if all they want to do is just read the executive summary, things like, highlighting, the purpose of the plan, and things clarifying the eligibility to occupy new housing in Nahant. And also, Nahant's 40B challenge as it relates to MBTA Section 3A. So as I scroll through this, please stop me if there's anything you want to talk about or clarify. We also included the role of ADUs because we've had some really interesting feedback around ADUs and discussions on ADUs. We've also talked about community preservation and their role and how funding is administered, as well as a way to help seed or create an affordable housing trust and use some of that money accordingly to help start it. And then if we receive any funding grants, something of a major allocation that is awarded for development that we do, we have the Affordable Housing Trust already established as being the financial vehicle to help disperse those funds. Let's see. And then, certainly the housing opportunity sites, we wanted to make sure that was illustrated in the executive summary. And then, we clarified, these are potential development opportunity sites. Anything that is a decision will land after this plan is approved will, be the responsibility of the Board of Selectmen. If something comes up, developer approaches the town, then there'll be, many different activities that could lead us to town meeting where the citizens will be able to discuss and vote on a site. We also, highlighted the housing goals and strategies. We tried to clarify some of or make it easier to understand some of the objectives that we want to accomplish. We also did remove the goal related to the Coast Guard housing. So, and that has been, removed out of our goals, and it's still in our potential opportunity site, but we've tried to make sure throughout the plan, any references we've definitely taken care of. So we have 4 goals, and underlying those goals are strategies within those goals. And that's something that we've talked about previously. Let me stop there and see if there's any questions or comments. And Dana, I see your hands up, so go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I don't want to, spend too much time, but the potential development opportunity sites, and I know we're going to get to this later in the agenda, But just as a point of fact, the Housing Authority North, that's actually called Spindrift. And it's not the right name, Housing Authority North.
Okay,
And then there's a separate, legally separate building, which is 32 Greystone Road. And that's family housing.
okay. So we can
So-
say 32 to 50 Greystone Road.
Something like that. Yeah, let me get
Okay,
the
we can make those updates. Those are great. Thank you.
yeah. And so, yes, that was the point. And then also, I know we're going to get this later, but I'll just mention it now that the Housing Authority sites are already developed sites. So the Housing Authority had a hard time understanding how there were development opportunities in the context of the plan. And so the Housing Authority at Spindrift, Spring Road, and Emerald Road, and Greystone Road. So, and legally, you can't force people out so that you can redevelop those sites. Those are some of the concerns we had. So the Housing Authority South down there, and that should be, Spring Road, Emerald Road, so people know what it is.
Will we have the locations listed for Spring Road and Emerald Road?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Are there any other committee members that have questions on the executive summary? Because this was definitely a major consideration and some of the feedback that we heard, and really try to rewrite it and present it in a way that hopefully if someone just wanted to, this is a big document, they can read the executive summary and really understand what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hi, Michelle. This is Josie. Can you hear me?
Hey, Josie, welcome. Yes.
I finally got online. It's a little
Thank you.
challenging, but I got on. Okay. So I commend everyone for continuously taking input. I think that's a very good sign that this is being done collaboratively. There were 3 areas that I was concerned the most. One was not targeting any one particular site. So taking it out of the goals, I applaud you for that. The second thing that I had was making sure that we were not pointing to diversity as and just pointing to fair housing laws, but not talking about the racial makeup of the town. I don't think that that's appropriate. As long as it's being done in accordance with fair housing laws, that was important to me. The third thing that I'd like to point out is that when we've had conversations with other selectmen and women, one of the things that was of importance to them, and maybe I didn't see it in this rewrite, if you can point to it, it would be very helpful, where the town folk get to vote on the site and the budgetary recommendations on what it was going to cost should be publicly disclosed, because there's a huge concern from everyone I've spoken to that, how is this going to be funded with tax monies? We are really a residential community. We are not a commercial community. So if you can just point out the last one there, where the town folks are going to get a chance to vote on the site and where they're going to be disclosed,
Sure.
what it's going to cost the residents or the town, that would be helpful.
Okay, so let me just clarify on that last point. So there's a couple of things. A plan will go to the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board for their review, and they'll meet the week of April 22nd to discuss the plan, raise any additional questions or feedback, and then vote to adopt it. The plan will then go to the state for their review. Assuming that our plan is in good order, it's approved. Afterwards, it comes back to the town, and it will be the responsibility of the Board of Selectmen to make certain decisions if appropriate, and working through the town administrator's office, if there is a site we want to start with. Now, some other moving parts here as well. There is a CPC article that's been submitted to request additional funding so we could prepare design guidelines that we can have ready for a developer for a site. And it is based off of the Board of Selectmen giving direction to the town administrator on, say, site 1, site 2, site 3. We will use that funding to get those design guidelines in place, and then they're already ready for us. In terms of additional budgetary requirements, some of that will come out in the design guidelines based on the sites that are sites that are selected. In terms of what it might cost the town, I think we're still too early because a developer hasn't been engaged, developer hasn't been identified. I've read, in terms of working on this committee, I've been doing more research and reading about what communities have been spent. I just read a recent article this week about the town of Lee. They're doing a multi-million-dollar affordable housing project, and the town is committing $150,000. But a majority of their funding is coming through state and federal grants. So if that's just to give you an example. I agree, we do need to have more information around the financial piece, but until a site is identified, and going through hopefully the design guidelines project, sometime, later this year or next year, if we get approval for the funding, I think some of that will come out as well, and we can also include that as part of that project.
Okay, so I'm not concerned about later on, trying to vote on the amount. What I want to see in this plan is putting the state on notice that Nahant intends for the site location and any costs associated that has to go by the town to be voted on. Okay, and that's what I'd like to see written very clearly in this plan.
So I don't know if we need to say that. So Mark, can you jump in? Because our form of government dictates some differences here.
Certainly, if it's town-owned land, then any disposal of town-owned land will require a town meeting vote, period. If it's a privately owned property and a private developer wants to pursue, say, a 40B, then that's a different path that
Okay.
they would take. So if it's town-owned land and there's a disposal of town-owned land or a reuse of town-owned land, that will require a town meeting vote.
Okay, but where is that outlined here? I understand about the private land, but where is it outlined here as well as a vote?
It's outlined in state law.
Oh, but it's not clear though. It's great that it's in state law, but I'd like to have something that's clear to the folks who are reading it. And that's where I think this plan fails on many, 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 many areas where, the average person is asked to either know law or go look it up itself. And it is not as clear and plain in language that the average person can understand. That has been something that I've said from the beginning, and a lot of our folks have said the same thing.
So Josie, I'm going to just stop for a second. So in this red line version, I'm on page 89 where we made substantive updates to the Coast Guard housing proposed opportunity site. We do say, to be voted on at town meeting, disposal of publicly owned land requires a town meeting vote.
Yeah,
Excuse
but
me, Michelle, could I just,
one
Michelle, could I ask you to just make that a little bigger so we can read it?
Sure. So
Thank
that's
you.
just in the red line copy. I'm just
Sorry to interrupt, guys.
searching for the words, so.
And is that tied only to the Coast Guard because there were other plans in place, or should that be standing alone somewhere where it says all town owned property?
It's in the conclusion also for the proposed opportunity sites.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Is it also in the executive summary now,
Let
Michelle?
me check. This is Yes, affordable housing, the town can exercise greater control over publicly owned sites, but final decisions must be made by the Nahant public through town meeting vote.
Perfect.
Okay,
Because that was a point of contention that I've heard from many, many folks. And
sure.
I just wanted to highlight it in this meeting, if anybody is attending, that that has been taken care of and it's plainly written. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. All right. Let me continue on. So, the next section is on, let's see where we are here, page 17. Okay, now we'll get into the plan, page 20, housing demographics. We reworked the section here around Mass General Law, Chapter 40B. We also added a sentence in the second paragraph referencing the comprehensive permit process, because I know that's an important activity that needs to happen. Preview guys. There's some additional, I would call wordsmithing, just to make the language easier for folks. Things like, I call consultant words, but I wanted to, make the language easier. So things like improving housing choice is one of those recommendations. I'm going to jump to the racial diversity section. So this is the area about housing demographics I just talked about. And 34, 35. Okay. Okay, so we did hear quite a bit of feedback around Nahant and our diversity or lack of diversity. And so we worked with MAPC to try to address this section and try to either soften it, however you want to describe it, in a way that we still have challenges in the community regarding racial diversity. We have to acknowledge it. I was not here. There's some generational, obviously, things that may have come up during the time period where new zoning was enacted, homes were being built post-World War II. There's historical references throughout Massachusetts around diversity and how communities and cities were established, neighborhoods. But we do have to acknowledge it. And so, but we heard the feedback around, I think people felt it was too demonstrative in some respects. People has had some very passionate opinions. And so what we tried to do is really review this section and make some appropriate updates. Now, we know we're not going to make everybody happy to this, but we've made our best efforts. However, it is an important component of the housing plan because every community, every city and town has, diversity. Some are greater than others. And some have had significant historical challenges around diversity. But for us, when we look at the data and the analysis that was done compared to Nahant, context communities, we're kind of in the middle. So only through some of the efforts of, creating affordable housing, making changes in zoning and to allow, it easier for, different people to move to the community, working with the T to create more public transportation, because that is also an important need for people.
Yeah.
Those things can improve.
I'm one of the people that had a lot to say about this section. I am a highly racially diverse person. Okay. I have at least 4 different cultures in me. So So when I look at this and it is just racial diversity, I have a problem with it. I can understand economic, education, and racial diversity, but when you're consistently hammering on the race, I feel that that is, not appropriate. And I find it quite insulting, and I've made that very clear. I don't care what your consultants are telling you. The only obligation that Nahant has is to be in accordance with fair housing laws. It does not only include diversity, it includes age, it includes income, education. And I find this section personally insulting, and I'd like to have it taken out. And I want to know why this is being hammered on. Because this should be more about economic diversity than racial diversity. It's called affordable housing.
Josie, have you read the new draft of this?
I'm looking at it right now.
But have you
Have
read it?
though?
Yep.
What, just
Because
now?
I'd like to understand what specifically is insulting about the new version.
Look right here. Discriminatory practices, racial diversity. Affordable housing is not about race. Affordable housing is about economics. Why are we making this a race issue?
Well, I think, Josie, I think there's historical context that may.
But it doesn't need to be in a housing plan. We did not create racial policies, from my understanding, in the town of Nahant. This is just bringing in another look, I have the ability to speak. I find this incredibly insulting. There's no reason to divide everything by race. It's about economics for affordable housing. Whether you're an old white person, whether you're a young Black person, it doesn't matter. Race has nothing to do with it. It's about economics.
It does matter. If you look at these stats, it does matter. Tony, Michelle, if you could have Tony talk about this a little.
Sure.
I think he's a good understanding of it.
Yeah, I mean,
And
first
just
of all,
remember, Tony, I'm 4 different races. And this is a person who's not white who finds this insulting.
yeah, again, I'm not understanding what specifically is insulting about it.
Because everything shouldn't be about race. It's about economics.
Everything isn't about race. It is all this is talking about is the racial diversity of Nahant, how it compares to our context communities, how housing policies have an impact on the diversity of a community. What we did was redraft this to say that housing policy is not the only thing that's going to affect diversity in the town of Nahant, because Nahant's unique. Nahant is an island community that doesn't have a lot of local business. It doesn't have a lot of access to public transportation. You essentially need to have a secondary form of transportation in order to live here. And so there are a lot of other factors that work against, the economic ability, which also translates to racial diversity in our community. And so that's why we tried to change. We tried to rewrite this to be, more factual about the racial diversity of our town compared to our context communities, but also not make a case that racial diversity is purely based on our housing policy. There are other factors that, even if our housing policy changes, there are other factors that may limit the diversity of our town. So it's really been rewritten to eliminate, I think, a lot of the concerns that we heard through the comment period. I will also say that, the state who's going to approve our town's plan is looking for a section on racial diversity in our plan. whether you find it necessary or not to be included in the plan, if we want to get this approved by the state, we have to have information about this in our plan. And so what we've tried to do is include it that it more so represents factually and eliminates the editorialism that was in the initial draft.
I still wanted to go on record. I find it unnecessary and personally insulting.
Could I add a comment there? So Josie, the chat's been disabled, but I was going to suggest, do you want to make a motion to amend it to either greatly scale back the racial diversity section or change it specifically by removing it?
Removing it, I'd like to put in a motion, please.
So
Okay.
Josie has made a motion to remove the section on racial diversity from the housing production plan. Let me just take some notes here as we're going along. So we have a motion.
Okay, I'll second it just so we can get a vote.
And Dana second it. Okay, is there any more discussion from the committee on this motion?
Yes, I'd like to add a couple more comments. I mean, if you get out and about and talk to people around the town, the racial diversity has been very controversial. Not for me, but for everybody. Well, in addition to me and everybody around town, and the language it's just hard to accept when we're looking at a housing plan. Sure, race is part of it, but it's more economics really, and we're talking about the future, not about the past. So that's kind of where I land on this, and I invite others to comment as needed.
Yeah, I'd like to make a couple of comments. A bit of a question or pointing out that Tony just mentioned that I think we need to at least have this analysis component in the plan as a requirement. Is that right, Tony?
Yeah, we do, and I just would add that on what Dana just said, we heard the public opinion of this section. They would, those opinions are based on the old version, not the new version, right? Because the new version hasn't been put out there yet. So I think we've tried to adjust for those comments, but also while, in keeping it in here for the purposes of the state approval.
Okay. So,
Yeah, so-
Tony, may I ask a question, please? Is this a requirement of the state, or is this a recommendation of the consultants? Because a requirement is different than a recommendation. The motion is to remove it. If the state comes back and doesn't approve it because it's in there.
I've been reaching out for virtual for over 20 years.
Go ahead, Josie.
Did you guys hear me?
There was someone on that spoke over
Okay.
you. If you want to restate it, go ahead.
So if I can, when I hear it's a requirement of the plan, I'd like to be factual. Is it a requirement of the state plan, or is it a recommendation that it be included by the consultants? Because if we remove it now and it's not a requirement, and if the state comes back and asks for it to be put in, then we can soften it. But going in, the motion is to take it out because I don't believe it's a requirement. I thought it was a recommendation. Thank you.
I don't know of any housing production plan that's been approved that does not include a section on racial diversity of their community. I don't know if it's a requirement. I don't know if I would call it a recommendation, but I don't think that I don't think that it would be viewed favorably by the state if there was not a section about racial diversity in our plan.
So the one thing I will say is a comprehensive housing needs assessment is a requirement of the housing production plan. This section falls within that, and racial diversity is a component of a comprehensive housing needs assessment.
Yeah, can I just follow up on my question though?
Sure.
Because I think it's a very gross, it's a very high level thing. So remove the section, but I think we could keep the section and just revise the content to remove some of the offending. I spoke to this at the planning board a couple of nights ago. I think there are a few sentences in here that are a little bit, just kind of sloppy history. It's unnecessary to, I mean, to me, just doing the analysis and getting the facts out that, that we want to create housing, diverse housing, and we are, welcoming of people of color, seek to, welcome people of color through that housing. I think that makes sense to me. Some of this historical, couple, toss in sentences here and there about redlining. I think that's, I don't know why that's in there. I think there's a history of discriminatory policies. I think that makes sense. It's more than just the 1950s and 1960s. So I think the historical accuracy part of me wants to say, and I've got an undergrad degree in history, wants to say, well, that's just a little bit sloppy. It's definitely not the 50s, not the 60s. It's, throughout US history that there are many things, but, you could write a whole book and many books on that. So, I personally would like to see this revised. I think you can simplify it quite a bit and still have the same effect.
That's
Going.
that's why I was asking. That's why I was asking. Which parts of this are specifically are causing concern. The statements that talk to that, we really tried to, the previous version, right out of the gate on this section, it compared us to our neighboring towns and almost didn't, compare us to our context communities until later in the section, which I felt was unfair because the entire plan compares us to the context communities, and then we're going to change our comparison, when it comes to racial diversity. So we changed that. And then it talked a lot about how, as if like the housing policies in Nahant were intentionally
Right.
eliminating diversity, and we got rid of that. We talked, we tried to make it more general. Yes, housing policy can have an impact on racial diversity. Yes, in the 1950s and 1960s across the United States and the state, some of those policies had an impact. But we tried to eliminate the statements that said, Nahant put these policies in place to limit diversity, because we didn't feel like that was fair. And then we talked, and then I thought, to kind of counter that argument about Nahant, I thought it was important to bring in the other factors that contribute to the lack of diversity. That it's not just housing policy. We could have the most racially diverse, friendly policy in housing in the country, and it would still be hard to live in Nahant if you can't make the economics work, which I can understand that part of what Dana and Josie are saying. And that's why we tried to include that in here. There's not there, this section you'll see here. People of different cultures tend to live in proximity to public transportation, employment, diverse religious institution, education opportunities, and these are things that don't really exist in Nahant. So we tried to.
Just not to interrupt you, Tony, but I think that's also raised a few hackles that, what that may or may not be true. I don't know that to be true. I don't know if that's a thing that is preventing people of different racial groups from moving to Nahant, is public transportation or religious institutions. I don't really know what that's based on. I think that may be true, and I'm sure that, like many things, it's partially true. I'm just and partially not. You know, I think we heard from Shannon at the planning board that, you know, he and his wife and their multiracial family moved here because they liked the community, you know, the way it was. And so, you know, people move here for different reasons. And I think that's, to Josie's point, you know, saying that, you know, this is proximity to public transportation, employment, these are definitely more economic arguments. Diverse religious institutions, I think that's an interesting point. I'm not sure where that has I agree that I don't see the need to have that in this plan. I think, you know, obviously you've gotten some feedback that it's a little bit you know, unnecessary. You know,
Michelle, could I
Yes.
suggest that certainly we would welcome any comments on this from the public, but from the members of the committee, if there are issues here that they would like to see changed, then we should take a look at that. I'm not saying the public comment period is closed. I'm welcome to look at anything that might be substantial in terms of public comments, but at this point in time, if a member of the committee has a issue with a sentence or any particular issue, then we should consider that and make necessary changes if we need to.
Well, there was a motion to remove it and it was second. I'm going to
Yeah.
amend my motion and
Okay,
I'm going to say, instead of to remove it, to amend it. And again, I'd like to see this more linked, racial diversity linked to economic diversity versus anything here that, you know, like I said, I'm multicultural and I came to Nahant because I could afford to. It had nothing to do with race. Right?
So, Josie, help us figure out how to articulate this, because there's no doubt that there is a wealth gap, right,
The
between
wealth gap.
white households and black households,
Well,
right?
I've
There
got
is a wealth
multicultural,
gap,
you
and
know?
that, sure.
It's an economic
Sure,
situation.
that's
That's
fine.
really what it is.
So, and we're talking about affordable housing. So there
Mhm.
is a link, and maybe, you know, maybe we're splitting hairs a little bit on how we articulate. I don't think there's any denying that there's, you know, that economics and racial diversity have a link to each other, and therefore it's linked to affordable housing. How do we articulate it the right way? You know, I think we'd be open to articulating it a different way. It sounds like we're kind of on the same page, but we're saying it differently.
Well, again, you know, as a person of multicultural, I'm sick and tired of everything being pegged to race. This is about finances. That's it. We need more affordable housing for whomever comes here,
Josie,
whether, you know,
that's not it. That is not it. I'm sorry, but there is a
Well,
link
you know.
between the two. There is a link between the two. Please.
and we can say it in a better way.
Well, tell us
This
how
to
to say
me,
it.
this to
Then
me
tell
was,
us- Then
yeah.
tell us how to say it.
and I did, and it wasn't
When?
incorporated. So, you know. And so if it wasn't incorporated, I see the effort in softening it. I do. I just feel that it could be softened even more. The point is to make policies in Nahant that align with the fair housing laws, which we already do. And there's nothing here that states that there's nothing within our bylaws or books or zoning that are contrary to the fair housing laws. So you don't have to point to race constantly. There's nothing that I could see that is preventing anyone of race other than an economic situation coming here.
Other than,
Economics.
exactly.
You have nothing in your zoning law that says people of color can't live here. You have nothing in your zoning laws that say only people over age 60 can live in public housing. You have nothing like that here. It's 100% economics.
Right. And
This
this
community is very welcoming.
and how does this proposed housing plan differ from that?
Because it's pointing to nothing but race.
Oh, boy, right. Okay.
I don't know if it does that. I mean,
I don't think
this
that does
one
it.
section, this one section speaks to the what the town's racial diversity is and how housing policy plays a role in that.
Mhm.
And there is, it is factual that housing policy has an impact on the racial diversity of a community, and that connection is through economics. Affordable housing, right, is going to serve the groups of color who are at a lower median income level significantly compared to folks that are not of color. So that's just factual data.
Yeah,
And-
Tony,
and this-
I think
this
it's
section-
important though that the community, most of the folks that live in this community, it's not about race. It's about the elderly not having a place to live or having some economic distress. So pointing to race versus making it more affordable for younger couples or the elderly to live in Nahant, it upsets a lot of the elderly when they're looking at race. Maybe they're just white folks. Okay.
But there's sections in here that speaks
Right.
to elderly, and there are sections in here that speak to young households.
Well, I've made my point. Whether you agree with it or
Well,
not, I still find it insulting. And I think it can be softened a great deal. I think this community is great. It has from what I can see, no policies that would be discriminatory in any way. It's just a matter of finances. So to point to race, and there's discriminatory policies, I don't believe that's accurate here in Nahant. I think instead of going towards the negative, one could take this section and state, that we do follow fair housing policy, that our zoning laws are not discriminatory against folks. Maybe putting more positive versus negative is how we can approach this. That is one perspective.
it doesn't, this section does not accuse the town of having discriminatory policies. If you read it, it does not say that.
Not only does it not say it, Tony, but understand that our zoning policies, our zoning laws were adopted in 1960.
Yeah, not only does it not say it, there's actually an argument that only having single family zoning in the town affects the lack of racial diversity. But we're not even going there. We're just saying,
Exactly.
this is what our racial diversity is. This is how we compare to our context communities. There are other factors that contribute to the racial diversity of the town. In general, housing policy can have an impact on that, period. That's the summary of this section. I know the previous version of this section was a lot more opinionated and editorialized, and there were problems with it, and we agreed. But this new section is, I think is really watered down. If it needs to be more, if there's still an issue, but I think it'd be helpful to understand specifically, what those words are, what sentences are presenting that, and maybe some suggested edits.
Can I have a comment about suggested edits? This is Dana.
Sure, Dana.
I know we all kind of want to take a vote and move on, but I do want to recognize what Josie's getting at here. So below the histogram chart showing Nahant, it's right in the middle. It's probably average amongst all these context communities. But below that, it says a paragraph, a community's lack of diversity can be linked to characteristics. However, housing policies are generally a key influence. That whole paragraph there just doesn't add anything. It's just kind of boilerplate language. And then it references redlining. And as far as I know, that has been illegal for many, many, many decades. So why is it even in there? And so that paragraph, I think, offers nothing about the discussion for racial diversity. In addition to housing, the next paragraph, other factors that are unique to Nahant also contribute to lower rates of racial diversity. Does this really help the plan? The next paragraph, I question it. I agree there probably has to be some reference to racial diversity, but this section kind of misses the mark for me. And that's all I have to say about it. If you guys want to move to a vote.
So before we do that, we have an amendment to the motion. We need a second to that amended motion. And I just want to restate it so I understand it. So Josie, your amended motion is to revise the racial diversity section of the housing production plan. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And is there a second to Josie's amended motion?
I'll second it.
Mark, second the amended motion.
Open for discussion.
I'm sorry?
Is it open for discussion now?
Yes, it's still open for discussion.
Okay, so the amendment, I would like to see the amendment from the author, Josie, what that amendment would be.
Well, I don't have it right off the top of my head, but I do believe that these two paragraphs need to be either eliminated or, as Dana had said, really point. I can't write it right now as we speak. I don't think
No,
that's
but
fair.
could you get it back to me by Tuesday with
Yeah, absolutely.
revisions?
With some suggestions, yes.
We're voting on an amendment here to amend this section. So I'm gonna vote no until I see the amendment.
Okay, then my amendment would be to remove those two paragraphs.
So you're going back to your original motion? Or,
No,
I'm sorry,
you can
so
keep
let me
this
clarify.
section.
So now you're amending your amended motion to just remove these two paragraphs.
Yes, thank you.
So is there a second on the second amended motion to remove these two paragraphs?
Are you looking for a second to remove the paragraphs that I just
I'm
mentioned?
looking for a second on the second amended motion to remove these two paragraphs.
Yeah, which two paragraphs?
She's
The one that-
talking about the one that begins, and Josie, correct me if I'm wrong, a community's lack of diversity, and then the next paragraph, in addition to housing.
The same ones that you talked about, Dana.
Okay, all right, I second that.
So Dana seconds the second amended, sorry.
I know.
Dana
Mouthful.
seconds the motion. I'm just, it's recorded, so when I type the meeting minutes, I'll clarify it. Okay, I'm gonna do a roll call vote. Dana,
Yes.
Josie,
Yes.
Patrick,
Yes.
Lynn,
No.
Mark,
No,
and the chair is no. So it's split. The motion
Yeah.
technically fails.
Of course.
I do think that that redlining sentence that Dana pointed out, I think, Michelle, we had that highlighted as like a sentence that we could go either way on.
Mhm.
We ended up adding that reference point down the bottom.
The footnote.
Yeah, I don't know if that helps it or not.
So I think one of the feedback points we heard at the planning board meeting was, and obviously you have to understand the purposes of footnotes is really more definitional. But when you click on the link, I think the expectation was there would be something that would point to them that was specific to Nahant. And it doesn't do that. It just goes out to another historical reference site. So obviously there would probably isn't there, to research, something specific to Nahant. I mean, there has been things regarding deeds and stuff. We've seen that. There were some recent publications and articles about, deeds with certain references and stuff. And Nahant was profiled with properties that they're still existing and they're working to clean those up. I don't feel that's valuable to put in here. I'm fine just leaving it as it is.
So this is Lynn Spencer. Can you hear me?
Yes, Lynn.
I would like to suggest that this get edited, and I'd like to try to edit it live.
Okay.
So before I put it forward in a motion, I'd like to, and it's difficult because we're just seeing this section on this page. It would be helpful, Michelle, before I launch into this, to just see how this continues on the next page.
Sure. Let me scroll down. So on the next page,
Thank you. Yeah,
we go
that's great.
from in Nahant, there are limited public services because the town's budget is primarily funded through residential tax base, which is limited in the growth due to the lack of developable land in Proposition 2.5. We go on to say, even with one of the lowest residential tax rates in the Commonwealth, the value of land is so high that tax bills are closer to the average of Essex County. There's very little commercial and industrial tax revenue, and subsequently there are few job opportunities. As a peninsula with a causeway of over a mile in length connecting to the city of Lynn, commuting to and from Nahant can be a challenge. There's only one MBTA bus route that makes 4 round trips a day with no direct connection to the city of Boston. So Lynn, do you want me to, so there's 2 things. We can edit this live. I can put it in a Word document and we can look at it. Do you want me to do that?
Well, no, I mean, I think we've got so much to do tonight that I'm
Okay.
sort of hesitant about this.
Are you looking to take this as a homework assignment and get back to me, or I can?
I would like to try that.
Okay. So let's do that as an action item. Does that
Yes.
work? Okay, so action item.
I understand that Josie had also put something forward. If Josie would kindly send that along to me so I can see what her thoughts were, I would appreciate that.
Okay, so this is what I'll do. I will put this information in a Word document. So it's clean, so you can work to edit it. I'll make sure Josie's included on it as well. And I'll get this out to you tomorrow.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's fine.
Okay,
And
Great.
Josie, you have my email address, so if you could send your thoughts along to me, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Lynn. I appreciate
okay.
the opportunity.
All right, so we're gonna move on. Let's see, page 39 was around housing stock. Just scroll down. Okay, on housing stock, we removed references to the total number of units. Okay, now we're gonna jump to page 73. 273, okay. Come on. All right, next we get into the section on the proposed opportunity sites. We made a revision to let me see my notes here, revised the last sentence referencing the portion of the Hunt Country Club as identified as an opportunity site in the figure. So as we move into this, pages aren't. Okay, here we go. So hopefully you can see that originally it was illustrated that was the whole site. Really what we're talking about is just the building for the Nahant Country Club and the parking area. And then there's some land to the, as you look at the building to the right. In terms of the Coast Guard housing, I'm gonna jump to that next section. What we did was we removed it as a goal. What we did was we leveraged a lot of the information and content that was written, and we included it in this section because we felt it was valuable as supporting information about this opportunity site. So we wanted to, you know, include that information. So at least folks can go back and, you know, recall some of the work and the activities that were done by the Coast Guard Design and Study Committee. Okay.
Michelle, this is Dana. May I ask a question about that?
Sure.
In terms of a development opportunity, currently the town is in the process of selling those lots. So help me with the disconnect between selling the Coast Guard housing lots and them still being development opportunity sites.
So this is a potential opportunity site. And if, as the town moves forward with that, to dispose of the land, if a developer comes in and says, and provides some opportunity back to the town on that location, the Board of Selectmen do have a right to take a look at that. We don't know what the future is going to hold us. However, they're still going to follow through and are executing on the vote of town meeting from 2021. That hasn't changed. This is only a proposed opportunity site. The other consideration is someone could submit a citizen's article in a future town meeting asking for a reconsideration of the 2021 town meeting decision. So
I mean, we've all
it's
talked.
town-owned land. We
Sorry.
have to acknowledge our town-owned land, and it's a proposed opportunity site. There's no guarantee something will happen, but we have to at least list it as a proposed opportunity site.
But at least as it's described, at least half will not be available. So
That's
right?
if the lots sell.
Why wouldn't they sell?
I don't know what the future is going to look like in the real estate market.
No.
Let's assume we're still in a market where real estate is, you know, continually appreciating for folks, and that land is, you know, someone will want to buy the land and build a house.
So Michelle, we have Tony here, we have some selectmen, I think maybe they can't all speak, but where, I think it's fair to ask, where are we as a town in the process of marketing and selling the lots, the 6 lots that were slated to be sold this year?
Tony, I'm going to give that to you.
Tony can do that. And Michelle and Tony, because of public open meeting law, I know the other 2 selectmen are on listening, but any issues or questions, I'll take them as chair of the Board of Selectmen.
Thank you, Mark.
So the question is, where are we in the process of selling these properties?
Yes.
Okay, so we just, so the Board of Selectmen have agreed to, hold on, let me turn the volume down on this other Zoom that I'm paying attention to with the Finance Committee. I'm multitasking here, sorry. We just got a draft RFP from our labor council, from our legal counsel. The next step is we're going to be procuring a real estate agent or a broker to join the town in the process of selling these properties. The next step after we bring that broker on board is to initiate the process of selling these properties individually. The tricky part here is that the language of the motion that was approved at town meeting says alternating lots within a 2-year time frame in 2 offerings. So the second we start, the clock starts ticking and we're limited to 2 offerings. We've talked a lot with procurement specialists on whether, how we can do this. Our belief is that if we sell in the initial offering, if we stagger the bid openings, it will produce increased revenue for the town. In other words, you could say, all right, we're going to sell lots 1 through 6, and the bids for all lots are due on the same date. Or we could say the initial offering of the first 6 lots, the lot number 1, the bid opening will be open on, the 1st of May, and then lot number 3 will be opened May 8th, and then lot number 5 will be open May 16th, and so on and so forth. That's where we're leaning, because it allows for, if 30 people bid on lot number 1, the 29 people that don't get it will be able to bid on lot number 3 a week later. So I would say, as far as timing goes, we just got the RFP for the real estate agent. That's going to be, I believe that's going to require a 14-day advertisement. So we should have, if we, depending on when we put that out to bid, and then depending on how long it takes us to evaluate it and bring somebody on, our original goal was by April. I think we're probably looking closer towards May now, by the end of April, have a real estate agent on board, and then start selling these properties in May and June.
And is that alternating lots? So my understanding would be every other lot that was created by the A&R subdivision.
Yeah, so the other tricky part, Pat, is that we still have three of the properties are still occupied. So it adds a little bit of a wrinkle in how you alternate the lots.
I haven't looked at it in a while, but it kind of dictates which lots go first, right? Does that mean you can't do 6 and 6, or is that, just
Well, so without having any understanding of when the other 3 properties are going to become vacant and demolished, so they can be ready for sale. And given that town meeting motion only gave us a 2-year window, that's where it becomes kind of a tricky puzzle. So we want to sell these in alternating lots so that, hopefully we're able to do 2 offerings and capture all 12, and timing that up with the other 3 properties vacating.
okay? Yeah,
It's tough.
I looked at this a few weeks ago. I don't recall what
There
parcel.
is no, there is, yeah, there's, it doesn't say which lots we have to start with first,
Yeah,
or how many lots need to be. You could do 9 in the first offering and 3 in the second, or you could do 6 and 6, or you could
right.
do,
But the alternating clause kind of kicks in, I think. And,
Yeah.
you
yeah,
can't.
exactly,
Yeah. So, okay.
exactly.
And just has that subdivision plan been submitted to the registry? I mean, has that gone through? Because I'm just in just one point of accuracy, it's no longer one parcel, right?
Correct.
So it's been approved by the planning board, but the properties have not been individually deeded yet. That will happen as they go up for sale.
But the subdivision was approved and it's gone to the registry of deeds, right?
Yeah, that's my understanding, but they
Okay.
don't have each property, I don't believe, has its own individual deed yet.
Right. You haven't sold them yet, so it can't be a deed.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Dana, I see your hands up.
Hi, everybody. I'd like to make a motion to amend the plan by removing Coast Guard housing site as a development opportunity as it's written. Because the best case, what I'm hearing is that some of these could be used as an opportunity site, but certainly not the whole thing based on the town has spent $1.3 million to demolish the houses and they're in the process of selling to try to recoup what's been spent already, plus the loan. So based on that, and plus what I'm hearing around town, this is kind of controversial, to say the least. And if we want to be successful with this plan, I think we should take it out. So the motion is to remove it as written as a development opportunity. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
So the motion is to remove the Coast Guard housing site as a potential opportunity site of the housing production plan. It was made by Dana and second by Patrick. Okay. Is there any further discussion?
Am
So-
I allowed to speak to that as a non-member of the committee?
Yes.
So I think we were very careful about how we describe this opportunity site. It's very much, if all the debt associated with this property is satisfied, and if there are properties available, and if the town hasn't met its requirements under 40B, that the town could consider this for affordable housing, but it would require a town meeting vote, not only to change the previously approved town meeting vote, but it would likely require some sort of town meeting vote for funding associated with studying whatever those properties are, if they're left over. So it's so light. It's so light as a opportunity site. And it's really dependent on all those stars aligning.
Well said, Tony.
Can I ask Tony, is there an article before this next town meeting that addresses that? Is there a citizens petition article?
There's no article. The question was, is there any article for this town meeting related to this site?
Right.
No, there is not.
So we're going, possibly these will have been sold before the state even reviews this plan, if it were to be approved in the next, by the end of this month. It's
Correct.
yeah. So I mean, I think that's one of my concerns is we're submitting a plan to the state that, we're in midstream of selling these lots, 6 weeks from now, 7 weeks from now, and it's going to cross somebody's desk, and if they care to look at it, it's going to be completely a different scenario.
Well, there's 3 lots that still have people living in them, and
Right.
So I don't think that that's, I don't think I don't think they're going to be gone in 6 weeks, and we're going to accomplish that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's very possible that there's no need to consider Coast Guard housing at all, because either we've already met our GLAM, because we haven't satisfied the debt, or because the process of selling these went faster than when we got to that part of the HPP, in real life. So that's what I mean. It's really a light suggestion.
Yeah, so I mean, and this becomes town policy once the Board of Selectmen vote on it. So, as town administrator, would you interpret that to only sell, to essentially pull back and only sell as many lots as it took to pay off the debt?
Well, I mean, that we haven't really got there yet. I guess I take my direction from the Board of Selectmen. But they also take their direction from the town meeting article that was passed.
Right.
So that's where it, the whole timing of everything, we don't, that timing piece of the motion that was passed originally about the 2-year window, we don't want to go back to town meeting to address this again for the same exact process that was already approved because we're outside of that 2-year window. And, who knows what the board looks like. Obviously, the board is going to change in the next month. Are we still going to be dealing with this property a year from now? So there's so many different factors. I guess I'll say I just take my direction from the Board of Selectmen. They take their direction from town meeting.
Right.
But I
Let me-
think our goal is to move forward.
Let me jump in there, Tony, as chair of the board. I can speak for myself and not for my colleagues on the board, but it is my intention to honor the vote of the 2021 town meeting vote. And my interpretation of that vote is that we sell this property and pay off the debt that's associated with this property. And, if something happens after that, that's going to require a town meeting vote, and we'll see what happens.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, if there's no further discussion on the motion, I will go for a roll call. Let me just restate the motion again. The motion was to remove the section on the Coast Guard housing site as a potential opportunity site out of the housing production plan. The motion was made by Dana. It was seconded by Patrick. I'm gonna go to a roll call vote. Dana,
Yes.
Patrick,
Yes.
Mark,
No,
Lynn,
No,
Josie,
Yes.
and the chair is a no. So the
Michelle,
motion
come on.
Okay, all right, thank you. It's a great discussion. I don't want to lose the momentum and I appreciate everyone's, thoughtfulness as we go through this. So, let me just go back to my notes here. After the Coast Guard housing site, we just made some revisions to the goals. That was to obviously address removing the Coast Guard housing site and tying those back to the executive summary. The next section, I'm just gonna scroll through. In terms of the goals, and I apologize if you can't see this too well, we removed the Coast Guard housing site, but we did rewrite these to just be a little bit clearer on what the goals were. So for example, in this goal 1, expand small and mid-sized housing options that are more likely to be affordable in the marketplace. And then the next one was around the housing trust. So let me just scroll down. So there's 102, 103. Okay, housing trust. So our strategy, we go from the goals into the 12 strategies that we had. So the affordable housing trust, what we want to do is we updated the overview of the recommendation. we revised it based on CPC source of funding and allocation. So that was where most of the revisions came in here. We wanted to clarify where funding comes from CPC, what the allocation is, and how that is applied. Then we moved on to 3A compliance and multifamily. We pretty much in this section just reorganized the steps so they followed a logical order. It's on pages 108 and 109. Almost at the end here. And then let's see. On the goal 4, we just added the word new to townwide public space. I want to really clarify, we're talking about new open space if available. And then as we finalize and get, in here, there was just some wordsmithing clarifications. In here, as you can see, the next steps for the plan, we try to just clarify the language and again, put these in a logical order that would be clearer and link those back to the chart, the implementation chart at the end of the housing plan. What you see removed here is related to the Coast Guard housing site. And then we have the last piece is, the implementation chart. So that brings us to all of the updates in the plan. We stop here and see if there's any questions or comments before I move on. Just want to take a note, so give me one second. Okay. All right, if not, I'm just going to move on. Okay. So we've discussed all of the plan updates. One thing I wanted to just highlight is the housing plan is going to be released tomorrow. What our intent is, we're going to publish both the red line version and the clean version. It'll be available for public comment from Friday, April 5th until Friday, April 19th. Residents can write to us at hpac@nahant.org. We'll start cataloging and organizing their comments and feedback and have that available for the joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board the week of April 22nd. Next is this discussion on some housing updates. I shared with you feedback that we received from the Nahant Housing Authority on the housing sites and the memo that we received from the Housing Authority. They did provide us feedback and helped clarify some of information that we may not have correct. We put those also into the plan as well and made some clarification. Dana, the ones that we talked about tonight, I'll make sure we get those editorial updates as well. And then Dana, you also had submitted a recommendation about creating a new goal on veterans housing. That was submitted and received after we finalized the plan with MAPC. So I did provide the materials to the committee, but I will put them up so people can see your goal. One thing I wanted to just comment on, and then we can just get into some further discussion, is in the final plan, we made revisions specifically about making sure we included veterans. So in goal 1, 3, and 4, we added additional language about veterans. We also covered that around local preferences and added additional information around housing vouchers and additional resources for veterans. And then we also added language later in the appendix regarding eligibility requirements. So I want to just make sure that we address your feedback around a dedicated goal, because all of the goals and the strategies were discussed very early on in this program. And then we went to the public and presented the goals and the strategies, and we asked for specific feedback. And then we published them in a survey as well, so we could get even more feedback from the public. I'm not comfortable making changes right now. In terms of the goals, I think we should go with what we have, because the plan shouldn't have to be exhaustive, but we can make amendments to the plan after our first plan's approved. And then we can work with, the town administrator and the board of selectmen during the first 5 years of the plan. And, try to address something that's more targeted. And I think your objective, if I have it correct, is to identify a potential opportunity site that could be a dedicated location for veterans housing. Is that correct?
Yes, and thanks for your consideration and updates for veterans housing. If we could go through my goal with the rest of the committee, I'd appreciate it. It's not long. We're talking about 4 short paragraphs. I'd be happy to read through it, and I'd also invite the members of the committee to have an open mind about veterans housing, which is a real problem. And if you want data, I'm happy to provide it. But this is a general goal, and in terms of, it's not too late for veterans. And we can go around saying, thank you for your service. But this is just a general goal. And if we could just go through it, and I'd invite the committee to read along and have an open mind. Okay. Do you want me to read through it, or do you want to put it up?
I'm sorry. I thought I was sharing. I apologize. Let me share my screen. I apologize. There we go. Can you see my screen now?
Mhm.
Yes. Can you make it a little bigger, please?
Yes. Okay.
And I just wanted to point out too that we've talked about revising other sections of this plan tonight. So we have time. Anyway, I wanted to just read through the goal, and it's if you guys haven't seen it yet, I just wanted to read it through. Expand veterans housing options within Nahant and be a strategic partner on regional projects to develop veterans housing. The Nahant Housing Authority and the town of Nahant could work together and offer town-owned property for development as standalone or as an annex to other regional veterans housing initiatives. And my editorial comment at this point is it's happening right now in Swampscott, and it's also happening in Lynn. Such development can be financed with grants from the federal government, state government, Nahant funds, including community preservation grants. After the end of World War II, there was a housing crisis. It was a demand supply problem. Demographically, the population boomed, and there was a lack of affordable housing. Veterans returning from the war faced intense shortages of housing, rentals, and ownership. Nahant stepped up and offered development of veterans housing on Spring Road and Emerald Road. And I think some of us here are very familiar with those units tonight. In the 1980s, these properties were conveyed to the Nahant Housing Authority under Massachusetts law. The units on Spring Road and Emerald Road were recharacterized as public housing, not exclusively for veterans. The Nahant Housing Authority became the operators under state law, with a state-funded operating budget rather than a Nahant-funded budget. There was a veterans preference within Massachusetts law, but it was not effective as policy changed over the years. This displaced veterans in many cases because of an ineffective veterans preference, which we still have today. Due to macroeconomic forces, today the whole country is working through another housing crisis. Again, there is a demand-supply imbalance resulting in very expensive housing. Nahant could respond the same way by offering town-owned property for veterans housing projects and public-private partnerships. It doesn't have to just be in Nahant. Now this, is generally, I've gotten favorable feedback on this. It's not committing the town to anything yet, but it's just setting a goal. And I invite comment from other members of the committee, and I invite you to join me and support this goal for veterans housing.
No,
So,
this is Josie. I very, very much support this, Dana. I'm happy to support this any way I can for you.
Thank you.
I also support the goal. I think that it's, honestly, it's just kind of a no-brainer. To me, it's obvious that it's a worthy cause and a worthy thing to call out separately. I think maybe some of the, I think what I'm understanding is the goal 2 would be added in the goal section, and then there would be some discussion that this would be added elsewhere in the document, like the other goals when they're expounded upon. So, I think I think it's worth including. I would just leave it for others to comment too.
Michelle, could you show us where this would go in the report so we can see it in the
so
context of the other goals?
yeah,
please?
let me see. I'm gonna pull up actually the clean version.
Yeah.
1 second. Okay, so this is the clean version. I'm just gonna scroll, and I apologize if this is blurring people's eyes. Let's go to the goals.
Page 92.
Thank you. So in this section starts our housing goals and strategies. We have an introduction. So goal number 1 is expand small and mid-sized housing options that are more likely to be affordable in the marketplace. We do cover veterans in this goal.
Mm-hmm.
So it's already spoken to there. So expand housing options that can support blue collar workers, essential workers, town employees, veterans, seniors, and moderate income households of all kinds.
Yep.
And then in goal 3, reduce housing instability for seniors and vulnerable households. This includes seniors, veterans, essential workers, people with disabilities, middle income workers, and single person households. So goal 3 also includes veterans. And then,
But it does not include a priority.
so under using publicly owned opportunity sites for affordable housing, capital A, affordable housing and new town-wide public space. When affordable housing is developed in Nahant, the town can apply for the state up to 70% affordable housing units. So we've talked about local preference. Additionally, 132 veterans live in Nahant, and the town could use local preference to set aside affordable housing for Nahant veterans. So should we identify a site, arrange an agreement where we're going to do a development of affordable housing, and we have identified a number of units, the town can say in that agreement, we want X preference for Nahant veterans, X preference for Nahant residents, and then do a special carve out for veterans. So say we do a 20-unit development and we want 10 units to be for Nahant residents, 5 that fall under the categories of, single persons, elderly, right? But another 5 that works towards veterans. That to me is reasonable to dedicate and certainly support, I think, what you're trying to accomplish, Dana.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree in principle, Michelle. However, it does not conflict with the goal that I've laid out here for us to we have an opportunity here to do something for veterans housing, and it doesn't conflict. So this goal can be in there, and it doesn't negate what you just said. However, it doesn't really specify any veterans preference. And we know that it just doesn't work. So
Well, Dana, let me ask you in terms of, you're a member of the Nahant Housing Authority, right? How does
Right.
that work with the Housing Authority?
we've talked about it in our board meetings, and we're generally favorable. We haven't taken any votes on this, but the Nahant Housing Authority is open to expanding and adding units that possibly could be veterans housing. That's why we're looking to get a goal and sort of as a pretext and something that we can build on together as a community, and as part of this plan. If we want the community to accept the plan, this is a great way to do it. Put a veterans housing goal in there.
I mean, I don't agree, Dana. As someone who grew up in veterans housing my whole life, on Spring Road, I don't disagree with your issues here. But I do think that the current plan as we have in place addresses veterans housing, addresses our preference for veterans housing. And, it's not, I think it's comprehensive in that sense.
Thanks for those comments. And I still feel like the goal is not going to conflict with anything else that's already in the plan.
Tony, before I go to Tony, is there anybody else from the committee that wants to comment?
Yeah, this is Josie. I have a question, and I don't know if we can answer it this evening. Do the state regulations allow us to have a percentage for Nahant residents, an additional percentage for veterans?
No,
Even
it
if they're
only
not
goes
Nahant?
up, no, it only
It only
goes
goes
up
up
to
to once?
70%. And then we
Okay.
can do a special carve out of that 70%.
All right. I just wanted to ask. Thank you for
No,
that
it's a good
clarification.
question.
But we can have dedicated veterans housing.
Yes, out of the carve out of 70%.
What do you mean out of the carve out?
So we can only ask for up to 70% of the units to be dedicated to Nahant residents under,
For chapter 40.
yes, yes. And out of that 70%, we can say 50% of those can be allocated to veterans.
Right. But this
Right.
is a housing production plan, not just a 40B plan. So I mean, to say that we would like to have dedicated veterans housing, it really doesn't. This isn't just a 40B comprehensive permit, site selection. This is housing production plan. So that saying we want veterans housing doesn't conflict with that, and it doesn't. We're not limited to 70%. We could have 100% veterans housing at any of these sites. It just wouldn't be under a comprehensive permit.
Correct. But we cover, we tried to previously, when the comment came up earlier on the first copy of this document about veterans, we tried to make sure we included in the goals and really kind of clarify that we want to include veterans in a local preference, and that needs to be a priority. Tony, I know you've been waiting patiently. Your hand is raised.
I think he's talking to somebody else.
Oh, okay.
Just coming.
He's doing a good job multitasking.
Sorry, thank you. Dana, I just wanted to ask, I know Mark kind of talked to it a little bit. I obviously don't have any opposition to, supporting veteran housing, but it is a little confusing when the thing that you read is talking about Nahant Housing Authority being part of this process, and it specifically speaks to existing Nahant Housing Authority property. But the other letter we received from the Housing Authority asks not to include that existing property in the opportunity sites. And we haven't heard anything from the Housing Authority about being involved in this overall housing production plan. So it's confusing the way it's written because those two things kind of contradict each other. So if you could just kind of explain that or help it, or try to amend it so that that the two don't conflict with each other, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, Tony, thanks for that comment. Could you tell me where the confusion is? Because it's kind of a generally stated goal, and the Housing Authority hasn't taken a vote on any of this. The Housing Authority would be open to additional properties, and it's been talked about in meetings. It's on the record, but I just trying to understand the confusion.
So I haven't heard that the Housing Authority, has articulated it to this committee that they were open to adding new properties. The only thing I've heard is the latest letter that we got from them, which had a request of eliminating their existing properties as development opportunity sites.
Right.
And this letter that you just presented says veterans housing in coordination with the Housing Authority, and specifically calls out Spring Road and Emerald Road. So that's where I think they contradict a little bit. And I'm not against it. I just think needs to be clear. It's confusing. I don't know which, it's hard to tell where the Housing Authority is because you have kind of two separate, it sounds like Housing Authority is not interested in expanding or redeveloping their existing property unless it's specifically for veterans housing. Is that
No,
the message?
No, that's not. I can't speak for the whole Housing Authority. I can just give you a general impression that we've discussed it and we're generally favorable in terms of expanding units to the Housing Authority, which could be some dedicated veterans housing units. So this goal
it's good.
Is high level, and it's meant to just kind of set the direction. If the town decides to do so at some other future vote, and that's basically it. And here's a chance for us to vote for veterans housing. It's a goal, it's something that can help us in the future.
Dan, let me get this straight then, to follow up on Tony. So this is not a request from the Nahant Housing Authority.
No.
This is your personal request.
This is Dana Sheehan, member of the Housing Production Plan Subcommittee, offering an edit. And we've talked about other edits tonight to this document, so it is not too late. And I invite everybody to consider it.
Dana, could you bring this to the Housing Authority? And I don't think that's the message you're trying to send, but that's what's coming across, is that the Housing Authority is only in favor of looking at their existing property or expanding their property if it's for veterans. And I figured that wasn't the message you were trying to send, but that's when you put the two letters together, it kind of jumps off the page that way. I doubt that's what you're intending.
Yeah, we're talking specifically about veterans housing here at this point.
Yeah, so Tony, I think we had a little conversation while you were multitasking, but there's a comprehensive permit aspect of this housing production plan, and then there's just the veterans housing would also be a broader goal that's not necessarily applicable to the comprehensive permit because there's limitations, as Michelle was mentioning, the 70% limitation on veterans housing under a comprehensive permit. But there's no such limitation. We can, we or somebody else could come in and build as much veterans housing outside of a comprehensive permit as they wanted to. So I think there might be a little bit of a disconnect between what the housing authority, and sorry for jumping in, Dana, but I think there might be a disconnect on what we're talking about versus, what's under a comprehensive permit, which I think the housing authority is more, my interpretation is that they were most concerned about the town offering these as opportunity sites to developers under a comprehensive permit. And if you do read the state guidelines about these opportunity sites, it's essentially, these are potentially should be considered as RFPs from the town to developers to come in and make proposals for these sites. So I mean, I think that might be some of the disconnect there. They're just saying we don't, these aren't development opportunities. They might be opportunities, but not for comprehensive permits. Anyway, that's my take on it.
Well, I mean, then we should get that right. If it's because I think the idea of including the housing authority properties in the development opportunities was, certainly not to take properties away from the housing authority. It was either, to assist them in adding more properties to their portfolio, or through, let's say the town were to sell publicly owned property to a private developer for a 40B development, and in exchange, instead of bringing all of that sale revenue into the town's funds, that some of it could go towards housing authority renovations or redevelopment, and it could provide temporary living space during that project. Those were the things that were discussed. So if it's, and I think that's why they're included. So based on what you just said, the concern that the housing authority may have had, maybe because they weren't fully understanding what the intent of the Housing Production Committee was. And so that should be cleared up. And then if this is just simply a veterans housing goal, maybe it shouldn't be specifically talking about the housing authority unless the housing authority is on board with it.
Yeah, I can understand that, Tony. And if we just simply take out the non-housing authority out of the second paragraph, we can just say the town of Nahant could work together and offer town-owned property.
I'm probably too deep into the weeds on it, Dana. I'm probably too deep in the weeds on this. I'm sorry. It was just something that jumped off the page to me, seeing both, letters.
No, I appreciate your view on that, but this is a separate standalone goal for veterans housing. It's not combined with the housing authority's request that their properties not be included as development opportunities.
So Dana, the challenge I'm having right now is within each of our goals, we have accompanying strategies. And so there are no strategies for this goal. And I don't know how it will be perceived by having this standalone goal with no means of what the implementation strategies are for it. Whereas we talk about veterans in each of the other goals to be inclusive, and we have defined implementation strategies which include veterans. So if we do a development site, we're going to include veterans. And I think there is a tremendous amount of consideration that whatever that development site is, and if there is, an opportunity to, split it, that 50% is for veterans and the other 50% is for other Nahant residents, I think no one is going to debate otherwise for that.
Yeah, again, thanks for
Right.
that, but it's just not clear in the plan that we have. And this clearly states a goal. The strategies would come, like you say, in a day 2 item or in the future. But today, I really feel like the town should step up, and I encourage the members of the committee to think long and hard before voting no about this goal. I've gotten a lot of support from veterans around the town, and and other people to support this kind of a goal. If the non-housing authority is confusing, we can take out that language, just that phrase, and keep it a strategic goal.
Honestly, I think what Tony was saying is it would be great if we could get the Nahant Housing Authority to endorse that. I don't want to speak for Tony, but you know, personally, I think it's a stronger goal if it's kept in. If you could go back to the Nahant Housing Authority, I don't know what your meeting schedule is, but and have them endorse this goal formally and then send it back. I mean, that would be, I think that would be a good a good opening to work with the Nahant Housing Authority, where we've had trouble all along this process.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that, and in the next meeting, which is actually Monday.
So let me make this recommendation. Let's take it as an action item that Dana is going to put this goal in front of the Nahant Housing Authority to get their endorsement and have them vote on it. Bring it back to the committee during the comment period. And then we can spend some more time either, rewriting the language and I want to spend some time looking at the document to make sure I can have it positioned the right way in the plan. And maybe I can also come up with like 1 or 2 strategies that will follow in the same sequence and order of the document.
Yeah, Michelle, just to your point on that, when you raised that, I actually had the same thought you did about the strategy correlation. And, maybe that the housing trust, the HT, could be, I know maybe it doesn't order in the same way, but I think,
Right.
The HT could address that goal.
Exactly. Is one of their first major activities is doing a targeted veterans housing program. No, I agree. That's why I want to come back to this, but I don't want to go up, do thumbs up, thumbs down on this tonight.
Well, actually, the motion's been made and seconded. We can modify the motion to say, make a motion to include this goal within the housing production plan, subject to approval by the Nahant Housing Authority.
Or Dana, you can withdraw the motion. We can have a meeting next Thursday night after you've met with the housing authority, and we can get, formal confirmation from them through their meeting minutes that they, voted to approve this goal.
May I just also emphasize, I think it's a good goal. I think that it needs to include strategies. So if that can be incorporated into this, it makes a lot of sense. And I would think the Nahant Housing Authority would want to see what those strategies would be.
Okay. Is there any more comments from the committee? Dana, do you want us to vote on this, or do you want to withdraw the motion?
Any other discussion from the members of the committee?
I'm yes either way, honestly. I think if we could bring this into tonight, I'm fine with that, and then work on it next week. That's fine too. Either way. Well, wait, a Thursday night, I'll be on a plane to Hawaii, so that's not going to work for me. So maybe not so fine for me.
I can do it Wednesday night. I can just look at the calendar.
Wednesday night, I'm going to be in bed, so I can get on a 3 a.m. flight or get to the airport at 3 a.m. So,
Man. You might have to just come to Hawaii with you. That's all.
That's fine.
That sounds good. Okay, so the motion is to adopt this goal pending Nahant Housing Authority edits and expansion of the strategy that underlies this goal.
So you're amending your motion. Okay.
Right.
So is there a second on the amended motion?
I second it.
That was Lynn. Okay. Okay. So let me just restate. So Dana's motion is to add this new goal, expand housing veterans options with the company strategies upon a review and approval by the Nahant Housing Authority. Do I have that right? Okay, Dana's nodding his head. Okay,
Lynn, did I get that right?
That's correct.
okay. All right, and we have a second from Lynn. Okay. So I'm gonna go to a roll call vote. So Dana,
Yes.
Patrick,
Yes.
Josie,
Yes.
Lynn,
Yes.
Mark,
Yeah,
and Michelle is a yes. So the motion passes. Dana, I'm gonna be following up with you. And
Thank you, everybody.
yep. And we'll continue on this. Okay. I'm gonna just stop sharing, jump back to my agenda. Okay, so now we are on any old business or new business before the committee. Okay, I've covered the schedule. I just want to repeat it one more time. We're going to be publishing the red line version and the clean version of the housing production plan tomorrow. It'll be on nahant.org. Citizens can write to us at hpac@nahant.org with their comments or feedback. We're going to collect those and present those to the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board. Sometime, and we're hoping to schedule that meeting, joint meeting with them the week of April 22nd. The comment period runs from Friday, April 5th to Friday, April 19th.
So Michelle, this is Josie. Just a question, since Lynn and I are going to take a look at one section and Dana is going to take a look at another. Should we wait until our comments are put in before it's publicly released?
No, what our next step is to get this plan in front of the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board. We can add those, we can present those sections separately. What I want to focus on is getting the plan out to the public on tomorrow. Have Lynn and you work on the racial diversity section. I will work with Dana on the veteran section. I'll create a separate not appendix, and a separate addendum that I will get out to the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board so they can see that. I need to get the source document from MAPC so I can work on it and then reposition it in the plan.
Okay.
Our hope is that we have the final document. The collation of the materials is secondary. I'd rather get the content right, and then we can move forward and get it submitted to the state. Is that agreeable with everybody?
Good
Well,
goal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. If there's no new business or old business to discuss, I am gonna open it up to citizens forum. I'm gonna ask the members of the public to just raise your hand so I can acknowledge you. Please state your name and your address. It is 8:43, so I would appreciate people's questions and feedback, and we can keep them succinct, and we will do our best to address them. If we cannot answer them tonight, we will come back to you. Okay, Jody, I see you're already unmuted. Would you like to speak?
Yes. Jody Grawl, 65A Bass Point Road, Nahant. I guess a housekeeping question. I've been submitting comments and questions since November, and I've been using an email address of hpac@nahant.org. Does each member of the committee receive my email?
Yes. So
Yes.
when citizens write to that email address, we all receive it. What I do is I take the questions that we receive and I put them in a single document. And I've been tracking every question and every response. So
Great,
when we
thank-
respond back to you, we make sure that the committee members also see the response.
Okay, great, thank you. In many of those comments, I've had two major issues. One major issue is I have a strong recommendation that the HPP and the MBTA 3A issue be separated, that they not be addressed together. Yes, there's some overlapping issues, but my main concern is the MBTA 3A issue is a change in the Nahant zoning, which I feel is strictly under the purview of the planning board and not and shouldn't be linked with the housing production plan. Housing production plans that were submitted by cities and towns before 3A was enacted, had that they were submitted strictly based upon the issues related to the housing production plan. So that's one of my concerns. That's my input. The other issue I had is, and going through the current red line draft, in the earlier draft, there was numerous recommendations to local preferences, and the local preferences for seniors, for veterans, for disabled people, references to families who grew up in Nahant not being able to afford housing in Nahant. And in Exhibit E to the earlier draft, it referenced approval from the state for, and I don't have the acronym in front of me, but basically the state having to approve any type of local preference to any of those groups. For months, I have been asking for any community in Massachusetts, and today I sent an email that it would be particularly helpful if it was a context community where the state has actually granted preference to seniors, veterans, people with disabilities, families, from Nahant. And I have yet to receive, I got an answer from the town administrator who spoke with the state, who really didn't have an answer. I think it's giving certain groups false hope if there's absolutely no likelihood of any type of local preference being given for either affordable housing being built, or housing as part of a development that's at a market rate.
So Jody, let me come back to you. Let me answer this. So since you've written to us in January, because this is where a lot of this has come up, Tony and I have been working with MAPC, going back and forth to try to find if there is centralized data of this information. We have written to the state and we've gotten, we did not get a great response from them. We tried looking at HUD to see if someone is collecting this either at the federal level on these approved plans. What I can tell you is from my research is I found where there were press releases. For example, the town of Brookline and the town of Yarmouth did targeted housing, affordable housing with local preference. And I think Yarmouth was 70%. So I'm going to go back and find that article and send it to you. And I'm gonna go look for the Brookline one as well. I didn't send them to you earlier because my hope was that we could find a database of information that showed, here are all the cities and towns that have done affordable housing, say in the last 5 years, and here are the ones that have done, the preference for their community.
The article reporting something is not useful. What I'm looking for is the state approving some type of preference that a city or town submitted to the state, saying you can, of your 25% of the affordable housing in a 100 unit development, we approve 50% or we approve 65% for local preference.
And Jody, what I'm telling you is we can't get that information from the state. No one has been able to tell us if they're collecting it and keeping it in a centralized database. That's the challenge we're having. What I can tell you is, just based on my own research, I'm able to find published press releases of that information where it does detail out that the state did approve that local preference to that community. That to me is as best as I can provide you at this time to give you examples where local preference has been approved by the state. I can't find you an exhaustive list, but I can show some examples that it has been done and the state has approved it.
I'm sorry, but there's numerous reference in the plan directed to we need this plan, we need to help seniors, we need to help veterans, and the reference to Exhibit E on how to go about that. Well, if you can't give an example, you shouldn't hold out false hope for these groups.
But there is no false hope because we know that it's being done. We already have published examples that have been written about in the press.
All I'm asking is please provide the approval for Yarmouth or whatever, so that I can see it.
Okay, I will go back and
find
my notes and I will send you those examples.
Okay.
Also,
Lastly,
Jody, if you could, when the new report is published tomorrow, if you could, maybe highlight and email us, the areas in the plan that you just referenced, what page and the language that you're talking about, that would help us, better understand, what you're pointing at.
I will. It's that email that I sent to you a few months ago with the references to local preference.
I think
I'll do it again.
We went through that. It's been 2 months now reviewing comments, but
I'll
I
submit
think
it.
Michelle and I went through it. So we may have accounted for some of those already in the new draft that you haven't seen. So that's why I was saying, take a look at the new draft and see if there's still some stuff there.
And my last area is basically going back to the basics. My understanding is that this housing production plan is necessary to delay an adverse 40B development, because Nahant only has 2.98% of affordable housing. The statute says we should have 10%. So we're presently, and for the entire time that 40B has existed, we're subject to a developer coming in and basically not having to conform to zoning if it does a development that includes some percentage, I don't know exactly what percentage, for affordable housing. This is the state's way of trying to get affordable housing built and encourage developers to build it. And to still, well, to build it. The HPP is necessary to basically over a 10-year period, delay that developer from coming in. And according to the plan, over this period of time, in the first calendar year, I believe it says we have to do 8 housing units of affordable housing. My question is, if this plan gets approved, let's say it gets approved in August, are we going to be able, is the town going to be able to create or assist or promote 8 units of affordable housing in the first calendar year, so that all of this work that we've done, doesn't go down the drain? I mean, it's a plan, but I don't understand how Nahant can do this. And even just 8 units in the first calendar year. Because the draft plan says we can stave off, if you will, these terrible developers from coming in and doing 40B projects by spreading out building affordable housing. In our first year, it has to be 0.5% or 8 units. I find it very difficult to believe that we're going to hit the ground running and in the first calendar year build 8 units.
So, Michelle, if I can jump in here.
Mhm.
It's a good point, Jody, and I appreciate it. So you referenced assist and permit. So it would be if this plan was accepted, we would assist and permit 8 units to be developed. Where they would be, we'll see. But whether that happens or not, it may not. All the state law requires us to do is to assist, right?
Well, we're submitting a plan that I believe says in the first calendar year, we plan to have an additional 8 affordable housing units in Nahant.
To assist and permit, right?
No, to have built with a certificate of occupancy.
No, I don't think it says that. I think it says assist and permit.
To be built, I think, yeah.
I believe, what is the number? What is the 10% number? Is it 126 total?
I thought it was 112.
Well,
60.
It's 160,
What,
Patrick?
The total, so we already have 48. It's, I think 112 is the dip, right? So we need
Difference, yeah.
The delta.
60.
whatever it is, I think we've been pretty clear that our goal is to accomplish this through the GLAM.
Right.
And so when you look at that, Jody, I think it also talks about percentage increase of GLAM, just like it talks about, number of unit increase in that same time frame. And that's something that, is realistically achievable, at least to be making progress towards it, which ultimately, if a developer approached the state to try to push through an unfriendly development, the state would work with the town. They would see that we're, making progress towards that goal, it puts us in a better position to prevent something like that from happening.
I understand we're giving it our best effort. We're trying the best we can. I'm just I think we lose credibility if we submit something to the state saying we're going to do something. And I mean, is it really achievable?
Jody, let me ask you, what credibility do we have if we don't submit anything?
The same we've had for the last 50 years since the existence of 40B.
Right.
If a developer wants to come in and develop something, and part of that development is affordable housing, we have more affordable housing than we have now.
Right, so if a developer comes in and proposes that on a site, then the town has no say about that. If we have this housing production plan in place, we have a safe harbor.
For 2 years, Mark. I don't
For
think.
2 years, for 2 years.
If we build for 2 years, if we build actually it's 15 units. For
So-
2 years, we have to build 15 units.
No, well, so Jody, we have that safe harbor for 2 years, regardless of whether we succeed or fail. I think that should just be understood. You know, they'll reassess at the end of that 2 years, and then they'll say, have you done it or have you not done it? And then are you going to continue to do that year after year for 5 years? So eight units per year for the duration of the 5-year plan. So yeah, we could lose safe harbor if we have not accomplished those number of units after 2 years.
So simply
yeah.
submitting the housing production plan, we get either a 1 year or a 2 year safe harbor period.
Yes, that's my understanding of the process. So you get that 2 year regardless of whether and I think your point about credibility comes into play at that point. If we fail to achieve any housing production at that point, does that gain or diminish our credibility with the state?
No,
Yeah.
that's not my understanding. My reading of it is we're expected within either the 1 year or the 2 year period to produce 8 or 15 affordable housing units.
You're absolutely right. We are expected to produce those units and have them built. But during that period, you get safe harbor. So if a 40B developer comes in, seeks a comprehensive permit, you can say, no, we're in safe harbor. I mean, that's my understanding of that 2 year period. And then at the end of that, we're going to lose that safe harbor if we have not delivered on that plan. So I think that's where I come into a complete agreement with you. I think we need to be realistic about what we can and can't produce, and have that understanding about where we're going to be in 2 years, and what this actually gets us, in either scenario. I think.
Is there an equal value towards glam
No.
in that?
No. So glam is we're either gonna hit it and have permanent safe harbor, or they don't count progress towards glam.
Okay.
Yeah, we've heard that. I think I asked that same question, and the answer was no. The focus is really on the number of units. But if we can hit, I mean, if we can take that 2 years and hit glam, I think that would be the goal, right?
Right.
I think that is the
Right.
goal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think
I have a follow-up question on that.
Jody, I'm going to give you one more question, and then I'd like other members of the public to have time as well.
Okay. We submit the HPP. We presently have 2.98%. How many cities and towns have submitted an HPP and reached their 10%? Annie?
I mean, I have no idea. I mean, we can get the information about which cities and towns are already compliant with 40B. That's available.
Compliant with 40B is different than being in non-compliance, submitting an HPP, and then becoming compliant. And that's my question.
I don't
Well,
know
you
if that's
don't need,
I mean,
you don't need a housing production plan to achieve 40B compliance.
Exactly. What I'm saying, I don't think we should submit an HPP. Because I don't think it gives any advantage to the town of Nahant.
so what
Except
do we
for-
do when the
Except for
governor
temporary
makes,
safe harbor.
yeah,
If we comply with the 8 and the 15,
No,
do you
no,
really?
as Pat just said, if we submit an HPP, it gets approved, we have 2 years of safe harbor. At the end of that 2 years, if we have not added 8 or 15 units, then we jeopardize losing that safe harbor.
I thought he said if during that period we haven't made any progress whatsoever to show a good faith effort,
Yeah.
it doesn't fare well for Nahant.
No, well, I think I was agreeing with your, if we fail at the end of that 2 years to, not produce those units, I was agreeing with you, and that won't look good for the town to come out with a plan that we can't execute on. So I think I agree with you. I think the preference though would be to come out with a plan we can execute on and get, I think we've talked as a committee for a long time on this, that we want to get to that land area requirement, which is, I believe, something around 3 acres, that would have to go into affordable housing stock, or be developed under a comprehensive permit for rentals. Those are all optional ways that we could achieve that. Those are all included in the plan. Obviously I've had some other issues with the plan, but I think those are laudable goals, as is just, I think, just producing some more affordable housing. I think that would be seen favorably by the state also, if we fell short but did actually achieve something. So we don't need to belabor it. Can Michelle, there was one point that Jody made that I really do want to raise though, but I think it was working with the planning board on the zoning changes for 3A, and I think that's going to be critical to make sure that it's not just a plan developed by this subcommittee and then delivered to the planning board right before town meeting next year. I think it's very important for the two committees, and I hope you'll be on the planning board at the end of this month. And at the end of this month, I will not be. I'll be no longer on the planning board, but I think that worked out well for the short-term rentals. People disagree with the outcome, always, but I think having two committees working side by side, and especially with the planning board needing to weigh in on zoning issues,
yeah.
I think that's going to be a critical, having those check-ins throughout this next year. So
Yeah, I've made a note to myself coming out of our planning board meetings. It's something I just haven't addressed with Tony to see how we kick off this new project. So definitely want to consider that before we start 3A with MAPC. So definitely like the recommendation.
They should be all joint meetings.
Yes. So I think what we need to do is talk to the chair of the planning board and get their confirmation, and then figure out how we're going to administer a joint meeting, So they're in attendance and working and hearing from MAPC as we go through this process.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'm
Good
gonna move
point.
on. Bob Vanderslice, I see your hands raised. I'm just gonna ask you to unmute and then you can speak. Please state your name and your address.
Bob Vanderslice, 368 Nahant Road. Two questions. One, what is the total number of units required to achieve permanent safe harbor? And then second is clarification. I thought I heard Pat say that there is no interim safe harbor if you're pursuing the land area safe harbor. It's an all or nothing. Is that true? Is that correct? Those are my two questions.
So I believe it's 10% of our number of housing units in town. So it's 160. We currently have 48. So the delta, as Patrick said, is 112 remaining. In terms of the GLAM, I have to go back to my notes. I don't have them. I don't have that answer right now. I might have to come back to you. But what you can do is tomorrow, if you want to email me that question, so I can have it and I'll follow up on it and write back to you.
And maybe I can repeat my answer, but my understanding is you get that, you submit the plan, you get your safe harbor for 2 years. That was my last understanding based on all the meetings and work with the but then, yeah, you don't get, at the end of those 2 years, if you've just been working towards, the equivalent of that percentage towards, a land area requirement, that doesn't, they're not going to consider that as a way to extend your safe harbor. It's only the 8 units per year, that continues on through the 5 years. So that's, every year after that, you have to be making that progress.
So you kind of can do it as long as you produce 8 years, even though you're pursuing land area, as long as you get 8
Right.
of 8 annually.
Yeah, they don't, if they know you're pursuing land area or minimum, they don't take that away from you. It's still,
Yeah,
so,
okay, got it. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Bob. Okay. Are there any more questions from members of the public? Okay, I have 9:12. That brings us to the end of our meeting. I don't know if there's any more comments or feedback from the committee.
My only point here, we have an HPP plan that we're going to submit to the state. Well, after we approve it by the planning board, the board of selectmen, but like any other plan, we're not going to get 100% approval from everybody, and I just think it's important to remember the old saying is, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And at the end of the day, I think it's in the best interest of the town to support this plan.
It's important. Thank you, Mark. All right. May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
May I have a second on the motion?
second.
Thank you.
Michelle, before you do the roll call, I was going back and forth between the two meetings.
Yep.
If any changes were approved by this meeting tonight, I don't know if there were or not, but we're going to include those
Yeah,
before
so
we post the new version tomorrow.
So this is what's gonna happen. We have two action items coming out of motions that were made today. One is on racial diversity, which Lynn is gonna take the pen on. I'm gonna send her a copy that she's gonna work off of and work with Josie to amend that section. The second is Dana is gonna go to the Nahant Housing Authority and get a vote of endorsement on the veterans goal. And then I'm gonna work with Dana to just update that copy and also create 1 or 2 strategies that go along with the framework of the plan. Afterwards, I'm gonna just put together an addendum, which we'll send to the planning board and the board of selectmen afterwards, I need to write to MAPC to get the source file for the document. I'll make the adjustments and the edits in the source file. However, we will do that after we have an agreement from the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board, which their adoption, and then we
Alright.
can send the final plan to the state.
So
I
what
do
we're
not
planning
want,
to
I do
post,
not want I don't want the process of sending one document to stop us from getting the adoption. We can put these addendums together separately and then put those in the final document that we send to the state.
but what we're posting online tomorrow is no different because
No
of
different.
tonight's.
We're just gonna put the
Okay,
red line
that was
in.
my question.
Yes, yes.
All
And
right.
I will call you tomorrow to take a look at the webpage and everything.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so I'm gonna do a roll call vote to adjourn the meeting. It is 9:15 PM. Patrick,
Yes.
Lynn,
Yes.
Dana,
Yes.
Mark,
Yeah.
the chair is yes. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great evening, and we will talk again soon.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good
Thank
night,
you, Michelle.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.